This will just be a very short session, simply because there's some strange technical issues, and also because there's only two of us here. So I'll do 10 minutes, and I'll try to understand what's happening, and hopefully next week it'll all be functioning again. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. So we are presently in the context of the Bodhisattva vow, the application of the Bodhisattva vow. And in there, we're studying two aspects of the application. You could say the training in the Bodhisattva vow, which is then the bodhicitta of aspiration and the bodhicitta of application. So these two. And like Shantideva says, the difference between these two is like the difference between wishing to go somewhere and then actually going there. So in the root text, actually, yes. So within the bodhicitta of as application, we're looking at things we looked at things to not to do, and then we're looking at things to do. And within this section, we're then looking at the presently at the 6 paramitas. So that's where we've reached sloka 40, where it reads, as well as vows of upavasa and upasaka, the bodhisattvas who are householders maintain the twofold bodhicitta constantly, in aspiration and in deed. Those who have embraced monastic life, as well as vows of bhikkhu, shramanera, and shikshamana, uphold the bodhicitta both in aspiration and in deed. Both maintain the discipline according to their state. So as far as then the various monastic applications go, or rather in terms of vows, in terms of what we call the vows of the pratimoksha, the basic vows of discipline, and this because we're presently looking at the paramita of discipline, there are the vows then that are held by householders, meaning people who are not celibate, who are not monastics, and then the monastics. So even though we sometimes would think of the Mahayana exclusively in terms of being lay people, then the monastics are equally, if not more, you could say, qualified to uphold the discipline of the bodhisattvas. But it's true when we represent bodhisattvas, for example, Manjushri, like we just had before, or Avalokiteshvara, and what we very often refer to as the 8 close children of the Buddha, these are represented as lay people in very sort of rich ornamentation. But nevertheless, the fact that the monastics uphold, in addition to upholding the bodhisattva aspiration and application, then they also have the monastic vows, actually is said to be a great advantage. And so they are regarded with great respect. So then the commentary, let's see here. The commentary then reads, lay practitioners who uphold any of the upasaka vows, as will be explained in due course, or the 24-hour discipline of upavasa, whether on a temporary or lifetime basis, and who in addition constantly maintain the twofold bodhicitta of aspiration and action, are known as bodhisattva upasakas. So there are those who uphold these lay people vows and layperson vows, and we'll see what it is. But there are those who take them forever, and there's also those who would actually just simply take this just for one day. And that's where some could take it for one day at a time, and they can actually do that indefinitely. So these individuals then on the bodhisattva path who take these vows are known as bodhisattva upasakas, Ordained people who take the vows of bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, shamanera or shamanerika, or shiksamana, female novice in training for full ordination, and who in addition have bodhicitta in aspiration and action, are considered to uphold the bodhisattva vow or the bodhisattva discipline of avoiding negativities. Let's just see if there's, I think there's a little footnote here. Oh, that's simply the Tibetan names, but you do come across them. So in Tibetan, these ordinations are gelong. So the fully ordained monk is known as a bhikkhu, and that's all across the various Buddhist traditions. And then you have gelongma, bhikkhuni, or bhikshuni. Now, in the Tibetan tradition, and there's a note about this later on, this is said to have disappeared. Some would say it actually never arrived in Tibet. So when we read about the monastic ordination as it evolved in Tibet, we read about initially this was established on the basis of Shantarakshita, the abbot, ordaining seven men who were essentially just trials. I think I forget the names of what they were referred to, but they were essentially just an experiment, and they did it very well. And so then the monastic lineage continued basically from them. Then there was another monastic lineage that came on later on through Atisha, I think. But anyway, there's no mention actually of the bhikkhuni or the bhikshuni ordination. However, in recent time, then people like Tenzin Palmo, Jetsun Tenzin Palmo, and others. I think, I actually know quite a few who went then to Hong Kong, to the Chinese tradition, and received the full bhikshuni ordination. So that's where then you have you could say the full ordination that take all the various vows then of the monastics, then as they are applied in the case of the male, the bhikkhus, and the female bhikshunis. Then you have the novices, they're called Getsul or Shamanera, and Getsul Ma for the female, Shamanerika. And then you have what is known as Gelotma, which are then those who then further are also training. Not exactly sure what the last one is. So that's with regards to these categories of ordination. And then we have the levels of ordination. Then we're going to look at that now. And then the root versus reed. Upasakas are differentiated in two kinds. There are those who keep a single precept, such as not to kill. If then they give up stealing, they maintain the vows in part. If then they promise not to lie, they hold a major part of them. If then they turn from sexual misdeeds and keep from alcohol, they are considered upasakas of a complete observance. Then those who have renounced the four roots and abstained from alcohol, renouncing thus all five, are honored as upasakas of pure conduct. So these are the lay people. And then there's essentially 5 vows that you can take to, you could say, in a greater or lesser degree. So then here, Kangyur Rinpoche says, there are 2 kinds of lay upasakas, the so-called complete upasaka and the upasaka of pure conduct. If one renounces a single negative action out of the 4, killing, for example, one is said to be keeping a single precept. So that you can actually you can take this vow, and in itself, that has great merit. So one might think, oh, it's just a single vow, but it's actually very important, not killing. If one then vows not to steal, one is said to be keeping a few precepts or having a part of the ordination. If in addition one vows not to lie, one is said to be keeping a major part of the precepts. So that's where you have 3 vows: not killing, not stealing, not lying. If again one formally renounces sexual misconduct, one is said to be keeping 3.5 vows. And that, for example, can mean to be monogamous or in general sort of abiding by particular specifics with regards to what defines special sexual misconduct. And as we'll see, actually, this can sometimes be interpreted as being somewhat cultural. The expression 3.5 is explained by the fact that if sexual misconduct alone is renounced, the vow is said to be only half fulfilled, as distinct from its full observance, which implies complete abstinence, meaning to be completely celibate. Finally, if in addition to the 3.5 vows just mentioned, one renounces alcohol, one is said to be a complete upasaka. Now, this is because alcohol actually becomes a little bit of an issue, because one could be keeping all the vows, but then you take alcohol and then you sort of lose the inspiration. Anyway, the Tibetan word for this kind of layperson is referred to as yongzo genyen. Actually, if they're then, we can see there's also those that are laypersons and also celibate. They're called sangchu genyen. So if one, in addition to the 3.5 vows, not killing, not stealing, not lying, and not practicing sexual misconduct, one then also renounces alcohol, then one is a complete upasaka. So that's where then it says, given that, and the reason is one is said to be a complete upasaka, given that without refraining from alcohol, it's impossible to observe the other commitments perfectly. The upasaka of pure conduct is one who has renounced all 4 root downfalls, namely killing, stealing, lying, and sexual activity, together with the consumption of alcohol. So that this is then the layperson who is also celibate, sangchu genyen. So it says here, the category of upasaka of pure conduct, sangchu genyen, includes all who are observing the 24-hour precepts of upavasa, a vow which was given for the sake of lay folk who find it too difficult to renounce sexual activity completely. They can thus observe pure conduct for a day at a time, on which occasions they observe the precepts of the Shramanera ordination. So we'll look at that, but that's where for one day at a time you could take 10 vows. Now, let me just see if there's how many participants we are now. There's Wendy. Let's just see. I think we'll simply, because this session has been a little bit sort of odd, I think we'll probably just, there are 4 of us. Okay. I'll go a little bit longer then. Let's just see here. Let's see. Good. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And there's also Monica. So there's 5 of us. All right. Okay. Let's keep going for a bit. So 43, deriving from the tenfold precepts of the Shamaneras, but granted the employer of gold and silver for the maintenance of wives and children, and with dancing and the use of ornaments, regarded as a single minor flaw, those who keep this 8-fold discipline at all times and without a limitation are upasakas according to the way of Chandragomin. So this is where lay people can then keep an ordination or keep these vows. And there's a famous upasaka or upasaka. Please don't rely on my Sanskrit. It's famously imperfect. Anyway, which then there's a famous upasaka known as Chandragomin, who lived just outside the Nalanda University. And there was a famous debate with I will leave it at that. Maybe that's someone else. I'm thinking of Gomi Devi, I think, yes. All right. Anyway, this kind of person then is a lay person, yet also upholds a particular set of vows, can do this for 24 hours at a time. In Tibetan, it's called Nyine, or in Sanskrit, Upavasa, or then keeping it, you could say, just like the monastics would do for a lifetime. And also one thing that one should say about the the discipline really is that this is something that one is welcome to take. And when one takes it, one says there is like a particular benefit of having it, but one can also give it back. And if one gives the vows back, there's actually no fault incurred. Problem is if one breaks the vows and doesn't repair it, then one would say there's an infringement, or in many cases, or in some cases, then the vow is completely broken. But it's important that in the case of these vows, it's something that one takes voluntarily. It's not something that one necessarily must do, but it is seen as being something that is very helpful. And so in some cultures, you can see, for example, in Thailand, you can take particular ordination, like also even monastic ordination, for a time, it can be for a day, it can be for a week, it can be for a year, and then give it back. And similarly, also in the Tibetan tradition, if you are a monastic, you can give the vows back. So there's different ways of doing this. And all of these are said to be of great benefit simply because at that time, then one provides the ideal conditions for the practice of the path. So it says here, lay people who are practicing the 24-hour upavasa discipline are obliged to observe 9 of the 10 precepts of the Shamanera ordination. They renounce all but the use of gold and silver, which they are allowed to accept as a means of sustaining their families. There in some traditions, and I think this is still upheld in places like Thailand and Burma, the monastics actually, at least in some cases, don't touch money. So that's sort of one of the early implications of being a monastic in the monastic community. Monastics received their sustenance through begging and never touched money. But this, of course, is different when it comes to lay people. So then it says here with regards to these persons upholding the upavasa, so that discipline is, however, commonly referred to as the 8-branch discipline. For all kinds of dancing and the wearing of ornaments are counted as a single minor fault for them. So that's where lay people they might have some practices that seems to be just part of who they are. Anyway, so that's where it's then down to. It's expected that the lay people are either wearing ornaments or that they're doing the dancing, and hence there's 8 vows. Anyway, it says here all of this is explained in the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra of Asanga. Those who maintain this discipline every day without a time limit, in other words, for the rest of their lives, are described as upasakas after the manner of Chandra Gomin. So let's see what the note here is. Yeah, that's the thing with the upavasa discipline. You could actually take it every morning for as long as you like. So that was the lay people. So then with regards to the monastics, then it says shamaneras. Now these are the monastic novices. Keep 10 major precepts. They vow not to kill and not to take the property of others. They renounce unchastity and lying and the taking of strong drink, dancing, ornaments, and so forth, lofty beds and seats, and eating after noon, together with the use of gold and silver. So if any of you have ever practiced what is called nyungne, which is a 2-day or 3-day actually fasting practice in conjunction with the practice of Avalokiteshvara, there you actually, I remember one of the precepts, in addition to not wearing ornaments, not dancing, all of these things, and actually what's called all the vows, the 5 vows, and so on. It also then includes not sitting on high seats. So of course in Asia, the perception around high seats is a bit different as it is in our culture. It's seen as being something of sort of yes, it has something to do with status. So it's always on the Bodhisattva path, you always say you lower you sit, you're better. But there is this practice then of raising persons up on high seats, and we can see that's also why when there are Buddhist teachers, then they are given a seat that's higher than the audience. So let's just see what it says here about the monastic precepts. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Let's see here. So the monastic disciplines should possess 8 qualities. It should be 1, unimpaired, that is not transgressed even once. Okay, so this means that if you take a vow, let's say not stealing, then you have to hold it. It's not as if you can go out and you can then say, oh, I just stole something once. And particularly when it comes to celibacy, then if a monk or a nun breaks that, then it's really that can't be done. Then the vow is completely broken. So that's where there's an emphasis that it has to be unimpaired. It should therefore be 2, faultless because it is free of any defect. And that's where, again, there's this power, there's this incredible, this quality. And one would actually say, in some of the scriptures, it actually talks about this quality being physical, that there actually is some component. Not exactly sure about how that would be measured in terms of, you could say, from the point of view of physics or biology. But nevertheless, there is said that there is a particular, and I forget the name of it, but there is a particular physical substance that somehow develops on the basis of keeping the vow pure. And then it should be 3, unadulterated, through not being mixed with any unwholesome factors. It should be unsullied by motivations aiming at prosperity or the concerns of this life. And that's where the motivation for doing this should be enlightenment. It should be uncontaminated by inconstancy. And that's where it's not good being lax and one day and then incredibly diligent the next, and so on. It should be 6, powerful through possessing the 5 foregoing qualities, and 7, praised by the learned and the Aryas. So basically, we should, when the monastics abide, then they should do this in a way that would be object of respect by sublime beings. Finally, it should be 8, favor the practice of concentration. Concentration renders the mind serviceable so that wisdom and the other qualities of the path may develop. So that's, of course, where when we talk about 3 trainings, we talk about first discipline, and then on the basis of discipline, then we practice concentration. And on the basis of that, we develop wisdom. So these are the 3, Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. Therefore, discipline is the ground in which all qualities can grow. So, so that's then where it says here, the precepts of the Shamaneras. Let's see again, there's a note here. The Shamanera, or Getsul, are sometimes referred to in English as novice vows. This is incorrect. The term novice in this context has been mistakenly borrowed from Christian monasticism, where it denotes a monk in training prior to profession or the taking of vows. The novitiate is necessarily a temporary condition, usually lasting between 1 and 2 years. In Buddhism, by contrast, the Shamanera or Getsul ordination embodies a complete monastic grade in itself, and many monks keep this ordination throughout their lives. Moreover, given that the lineage of Bhikkhuni or Girolma vows has been interrupted or may never have existed in Tibet, the vast majority of Tibetan Buddhist nuns are permanent Getsulmas. So this is, I think we can safely assume this is thanks to Woolston Fletcher's knowledge of how ordination works in the Christian tradition, and is able to differentiate this from the Buddhist approach. So this is, of course, significant. So when we talk about a Getsulma or a Getsul, it would be wrong to refer to them as novices. They don't have the full ordination as such, but nevertheless, they are monastics. So then it says, those who have received this ordination, the shamanera or Getsul ordination, are bound to abstain from four-root faults. They vow not to perpetrate the act of killing a human being or human embryo. They vow not to steal the property of another. They vow not to indulge in sexual intercourse through any of the three openings. Finally, they vow not to lie to someone who understands speech, who knows what is being talked about, and who is in a normal state of consciousness, and who is not a hermaphrodite or without sexual differentiation. Now, this can become pretty a thorny issue in the context of the present day debates around gender and so forth. So let's just see here. I think this footnote probably might clarify it. The basic idea here is that the lie, and this is where we talk about a lie, is only a lie if actually we really succeed in deceiving someone, or that we intend to deceive someone. So, for example, if we tell a lie to someone who doesn't, have any understanding of what we're talking about, it's not really, doesn't fully amount to a lie. It's not fully, we don't achieve our intention, which is deception completely. So that's why it says here, the basic idea here is that a lie is only completely accumulated and the vow broken when a falsehood is spoken to a human being with the above mentioned qualifications. Okay. Hermaphrodites and so on are presumably mentioned here in the sense of their not being in possession of the entire range of human attributes. The preoccupation, and that's where for us to enter into this, we need to understand what is the intention behind this and sort of not immediately sort of align it with some of our contemporary discussions. The preoccupation is one of scholastic precision in stipulating the criteria for the loss of the vow. It does not mean that lying to eunuchs is admissible. So I'm not entirely sure where this note comes from, but essentially we could say this is the sort of definitions here are simply intended to clarify and not particularly express some sort of a prejudice. If any of these four faults is committed in such a way that the four fundamental elements of basis, intention, act, and result are all present, the ordained state of shamanera is torn asunder. So I think we previously in the section on karma, we talked about what really constitutes a full an action, you could say, that has complete consequence. The element is then, you could say, the object of, for example, an act. Let's say there's another person, and then we intend to lie to them. We lie, and they actually believe us. So then there is the basis, intention, act, and result. If all these are present, the ordained state of shamanera is torn asunder. Whether the ordination can be repaired depends on whether there is any intention to conceal the act. So that's where if someone has committed a downfall of some sort, then this can be repaired if there's how do you say, if they're willing to acknowledge their act. The same applies here in the case of fully ordained monks. And this, by the way, is also in the monastic communities. You twice a month have what is known as sojong, which is essentially the practice of amending and repairing, amending and purifying. I think we can say that. So that's where the monastics twice a month, they actually have a practice of gathering and then exposing whatever faults there might be to the elders in the community, as well as to the community at large. So this is where the monks and nuns, they congregate, and then they have this practice then of essentially making sure that their vows are purified and, you could say, fresh. And the same actually applies in the Vajrayana when we do tsok. This is for us to purify and restore you could say, the freshness and the power of our commitment to the path. So there are moreover 6 additional faults, which, if committed, must be confessed. These are: 1, the taking of alcohol or any other intoxicating substance, because they impair vigilance. So that's fairly straightforward. The indulgence in all that is a cause of pretension and attachment for the things of samsara, such as art, dancing, singing, and the playing of music. And that's, of course, where you have sacred art, you have sacred dancing, sacred song, sacred music, and all of that. But here we're more talking about those that engender the attachment and hence solidification of the duality that perpetuates samsara. So it's not as if necessarily in Buddhist cultures you don't find these. There are plenty of this kind of artistic expression. But it really depends whether or not this is linked to the path or not. The wearing of ornaments, garlands, perfumes, and cosmetics, the use of valuable furniture, seats, and beds adorned with precious substance. All such accoutrements should be of plain wood, and in no case no more than a cubit in height. So, cubit, I think, is an arm length, right? So these are all, you could say, the part of the shamanera ordination, and these are things that you then avoid. The consumption of food at improper times, such as after midday. All meals should be confined to the period between the hours of dawn and noon. And that's again where monastics, they go begging in the morning. For example, if you go to Thailand or Burma, you can see that. And also in Tibet, many ordained persons actually kept this vow as well. But there are also monastics in Tibet that didn't keep the vow. And there's probably more who didn't keep it. Somehow, I think also the climate in Tibet had a lot to do with the practice of also eating at night. But like I say, you do have, I know, several monastics who don't take meals at night. And the acceptance of precious gifts, such as gold and silver, and the use of these as though they were personal possessions. Shamaneras are considered superior to the upasakas. To save them, however, from being overwhelmed by a multitude of regulations, their vows have been condensed into 10 general precepts, as mentioned before. This was established after the incident of Vriji Putraka, as recorded in the Vinaya. Oh, I actually looked that up and now I can't remember the story. Sorry about that. Anyway, nevertheless, in considering the matter in more detail, yeah, there was a group. That's right. It was a group of monastics that began after the Buddha to develop their own sort of their own vows, their own sort of homespun take on how the path should be practiced. So that's where it was seen to be that the vows were there was too many, and to just keep it really clear, then it was limited then to these 10. That's right. Nevertheless, in considering the matter in more detail, the vows of the Shamanera ordination specifically prohibit 33 transgressions. These comprise, first of all, the 4 root transgressions of homicide, lying, theft, and sexual intercourse. Linked with these are 3 kinds of killing: the slaughter of animals, the flooding of vegetation that is habited of insects, and the drinking of water in which there are insects. Then there are 12 kinds of mendacity. To tell lies without due reason, falsely to accuse another of broken vows, and to provoke disturbance in the religious community by the spreading of false rumors, or 4, to be in agreement with someone who does this. 5, to scandalize the laity by criticism of the monks, accusing them, for instance, of drinking alcohol, to utter a falsehood deliberately, to accuse a monk of favoritism, to denigrate the administrators of the monastery, to accuse another of teaching in order to gain sustenance, to accuse someone of committing residual faults. And 11, to express contempt for the precepts. And finally, to conceal one's share of food with the intention of getting more. All this comes to a total of 19 transgressions. In addition, there are the faults of drunkenness, the 3 kinds of dancing, wearing 3 kinds of ornaments, sleeping in high beds, sleeping in costly beds, taking food after midnight, and accepting gold and silver. Finally, there is the failure to renounce the manners of the laity. Let's just see what that is. Anyway, you can get the gist here, which is really just avoiding things that typically are, you could say, driven by self-centered motivation and desires to just please the senses. And again, this is not prescription because it is wrong as such, but it's simply just because this is what you could say becomes an obstacle in the practice. So this is something one can verify on the basis of one's own experience, that certain ways, like for example, just sleeping in costly beds doesn't necessarily have to be about the price, but it's more just this sort of the practice of just indulging in laziness and taking food after midday and so on. All of these are really practices of disciplines that enhance the path, the practice of the path, and then going back, having committed to that and then going back on it, again, this of course becomes an obstacle. Anyway, let's see. Manners of the lay people, for example, Noche once said, okay, there you go. That's because also in Asia, when you were a lay person, then you would generally leave your hair long. You can see this both in China and Tibet. And then the failure to assume a specific demeanor of a monk. Okay, let's see what that is. In the sense of wearing the robes and not carrying weapons. Okay. And the failure to show deference to one's abbot. Altogether, this comes to 33 transgressions. So, of course, this doesn't, in some way, doesn't apply to a lot of us who are lay persons, but at the same time, this is very much part of the culture and the protocol around monastics. And, you know, what we can probably appreciate the value of this, even though we might not necessarily practice this ourselves. 45. Women who prepare themselves to take full ordination must renounce 12 extra things, like touching men. And since they are prey to their emotions, they must pass 2 years probation, testing thus their aptitude for vows. Okay. This, of course, is again one of these things that is difficult to treat within the our particular culture. There would be undoubtedly be some practical measures behind this. So sorry about that. Again, there seems to be having this issue. Hello again. So apologies for the continual interruptions here. Just an internet issue where I am right now. What's that? Let's just see here. Hello, everyone. Look, I'm just gonna have to finish now because there's no point in continuing. It's dropping out all the time. So we'll conclude at this point. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore and more.